Growing up, I never felt like I belonged in America. TV shows and movies always depicted my people as either criminals or drug dealers. History books referenced my people in the past tense, as if we were relics that didn't exist anymore. So why did this happen? These colonizer governments create institutions that restrict or completely take away the rights of indigenous and oppressed populations within their boundaries. Political institutions create a facade of legitimacy for corrupt politicians who create laws that terrorize and harass indigenous and oppressed populations. Whenever held accountable, they simply blame the paperwork, saying it's not their fault, it's just how the laws are written. Financial institutions gatekeep economic tools that would allow indigenous and oppressed populations the ability to acquire wealth. The result is an increased servitude on behalf of the indigenous and oppressed populations to colonizer-owned industries. Removal and relocation programs exist to force oppressed and indigenous populations off of resource-rich areas. This includes gerrymandering and gentrification when it comes to urban and suburban areas. The result is an indigenous and oppressed population once again having to give over their advantages to the colonizers in power. As empires rebranded to nations, the American Empire created and instituted the idea of race in its society. This particular race class system allowed further oppression of indigenous and oppressed populations within its boundaries. The result is an American myth that was cultivated by an education system that forced indigenous and oppressed populations to obey colonizer belief systems, colonizer morals, colonizer religion, colonizer takes on history. The result is an education system that furthered the colonial myth of white morals and white beliefs and white traditions over indigenous and oppressed populations' culture. This allowed the full indoctrination and assimilation of generation descendants of oppressed and indigenous populations. Colonizers know that the greatest threat to colonizer power is the children that grow up maintaining their ties to their cultural ancestry. By removing those cultural ties to their history, colonizers hoped for a generation that would grow up to actively fight for the colony itself. The result of this American identity is patriotism, model citizens that grow up believing full-heartedly in the nationalist propaganda. This can be seen in American citizens who vilify immigrants, who've forgotten their own history and have revised it and replaced it with white supremacist or white ideologies that they uphold to be the truth. For those that choose to challenge nationalist propaganda and explore their ancestral ties, every decision is an act of resistance, an act of decolonization. Because when it comes down to understanding one's own autonomy and individual sovereignty, one must honor the accuracy of history and where they came from. The greatest threat to colonizer control is the reclamation of cultural identity. A form of resistance begins to emerge. That resistance leads to change. Change leads to paradigm shifts in power, and colonizers get very, very nervous.